Welcome to today's powerful session. If you've been struggling with low energy, lack of focus, or you just can't seem to stay consistent, this video could change everything. Today, either pain, we're diving into the science of motivation and drive with none other than Dr. Andrew Huberman, a world-renowned neuroscientist from Stanford University. You'll discover how your brain actually creates motivation. And more importantly, how you can train it to stay driven even when you're tired, distracted, or feeling lost. No more guesswork. No more waiting for inspiration. This is about building motivation like a muscle, strong, steady, and unstoppable. Get ready to take control of your mind, your habits, and your future. Because what you're about to learn isn't just motivational, it's neuroscience-powered transformation. If you're ready to level up your mindset, make sure to like this video, subscribe, great pain, and hit the bell icon. Let's build your drive together. Motivation and drive are not just emotional states. They are deeply rooted in the brain's chemistry, particularly in a molecule called dopamine. Either pain. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the neurotransmitter of pleasure, but in reality, it plays a much more critical role in anticipation, pursuit, and motivation. Dr. Andrew Huberman emphasizes that to truly increase motivation, we must learn to leverage dopamine not merely as a reward after achievement, but as a tool during the process of pursuing goals. When we accomplish something, dopamine spikes and gives us a feeling of satisfaction. However, the key to sustained drive lies in being able to access dopamine while in action, while moving toward the goal, not just at the end. This shift in focus fundamentally transforms how we experience effort and how we stay consistent instead of constantly waiting for an end result to feel good. We begin to feel motivated and energized by the process itself. And this change is not automatic. It requires training the mind to associate effort with internal reward. For instance, rather than saying, I'll feel great when I finish this workout, one can learn to say, pain, I feel good because I'm doing the hard work now. By rewiring your relationship with effort in this way, you create a loop where dopamine is released throughout the journey, helping you stay focused and engaged over time. Neuroscience research shows that dopamine is released in the brain's reward pathways, primarily the mesolimbic and mesocortical systems. But it also influences the prefrontal cortex, which governs planning, decision-making, and sustained attention. When dopamine is elevated appropriately during effort, it enhances the ability to stay on task and block out distractions. Great pain. That's why individuals who learn to self-generate dopamine through mindset and behavior tend to show higher resilience, stronger focus, and more consistent progress. One of the most effective tools to support this internal shift is understanding the role of subjective framing. If you perceive a task as punishment or obligation, the brain suppresses dopamine. If you frame the same task as an opportunity for growth, learning, or strength, great pain, the brain rewards that perception with greater dopamine release. Dr. Huberman recommends practicing this reframing deliberately, especially during difficult or repetitive tasks, great pain, so that your brain learns to expect and enjoy the process, not just the result. Physical practices can also support this mental framing. Strategic use of movement, exercise, cold exposure, and breath work has been shown to increase baseline dopamine levels and overall neural readiness. These tools essentially prime your nervous system to be more responsive to goal-oriented behaviors. But even beyond that, simply becoming aware of your internal dialogue and shifting it from outcome obsession to process appreciation can have profound neurological benefits. Great pain. The brain begins to register progress markers, even small ones, as meaningful and rewarding, which in turn reinforces the behavior and strengthens motivation. The more frequently you reward effort mentally, the more you train your brain to see challenge and struggle as desirable. This cultivates a high drive mindset where obstacles become fuel and consistency becomes a source of pride rather than pressure. Forward action is one of the most powerful triggers for breaking out of mental stagnation and reigniting motivation. Either great pain, according to Dr. Andrew Huberman, movement, especially deliberate pain, goal-directed movement, sends a powerful signal to the brain that it's time to shift from passive to active states. Pain, when a person is feeling stuck, unmotivated, or indecisive, their nervous system is often in a state of paralysis where the brain is overanalyzing and underacting. This state reinforces itself. The more you hesitate, the more difficult it becomes to initiate action. However, the nervous system is wired to respond positively when the body moves forward, whether that's standing up, walking, or engaging in any physical activity that implies direction. Great pain. This forward action communicates to the brain that it needs to enter a mode of attention, problem solving. Pain and energy release, dopamine, norepinephrine, and other neuromodulators begin to circulate, heightening awareness and giving the brain a renewed sense of purpose and control. Dr. Huberman emphasizes that forward movement doesn't have to be massive or intense. Even small physical gestures can create the neurological shift needed to start building momentum. This is why activities like taking a brisk walk, changing physical posture, great pain, or performing a simple task like making the bed can have outsized effects on mental energy. These micro actions activate parts of the midbrain associated with motivation and begin disrupting the circuits that keep you stuck in cycles of overthinking. It's a feedback loop. When you move forward physically, great pain, your brain starts engaging the motivational circuits necessary for larger, more complex goals. What starts a minor act of motion quickly turns into a series of decisions and behaviors that support greater drive and productivity. The idea is not just to move pain, but to direct that movement with intent. Intention adds meaning to action and enhances the brain's response. If you step outside with the clear intention of resetting your state or starting a creative task, great pain, your brain recognizes that purpose and releases neurochemicals that support alertness and clarity. This is especially powerful in the early part of the day when your body's cortisol and dopamine rhythms are naturally aligned with action taking. Forward action taken early in the day compounds and helps establish a proactive mindset for the rest of your activities. Pain, when repeated consistently, it begins to shape identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who's stuck, but as someone who initiates, moves pain, and creates. The Huberman also points out that forward movement activates the sympathetic nervous system, but in a regulated way that's optimal for focus and drive. Rather than overwhelming you with stress, great pain. This controlled activation gives you just enough arousal to feel awake and ready without tipping into anxiety. The act of forward movement essentially primes system to be more responsive to opportunities, challenges, and rewards. Either great pain. By engaging the locomotor circuits and aligning them with goal-oriented thought patterns, pain, your entire nervous system begins to synchronize around progress. As this synchronization grows stronger, so does the ability to transition from a passive reactive mode into an active. Generatives where possibilities seem more accessible and motivation becomes more self-sustaining. One of the most powerful tools for sustaining motivation and drive is the practice of visualizing the effort instead of only focusing on the outcome. Dr. Andrew Huberman explains that the brain is highly influenced by what it anticipates. Either great pain. Most people make the mistake of only visualizing the end goal, the reward, the success, the applause, which can feel exciting in the moment, but does little to prepare the nervous system for the work required to get there, either great pain. When the actual effort begins, they experience a mismatch between the idealized vision and the reality of struggle, great pain, which often leads to frustration, burnout, or loss of motivation. Great pain. The more effective approach is to visualize the effort itself. The early mornings, the discomfort, the repetition, the mental resistance, and to rehearse embracing those moments as meaningful and fulfilling. When you imagine yourself working hard, staying focused, overcoming boredom, or pushing through discomfort, great pain. You train the brain to expect those experiences and respond to them with resilience rather than resistance. This mental rehearsal changes how the brain reacts in real time. Instead of interpreting effort as something negative to be avoided, the nervous system starts interpreting it as a familiar, expected part of the journey. This shift rewires the brain's reward system. The effort becomes something to be proud of, something that signals progress and capability, not just pain or sacrifice. Over time, this internal narrative strengthens a sense of purpose and discipline, making it easier to take consistent action even when motivation fluctuates. Dr. Huberman draws on neuroscience to explain that the brain's dopaminergic system, which fuels drive and pleasure, responds not just to external rewards, but also to the anticipation and mental framing of effort. Pain, when you visualize yourself enduring and navigating challenges, dopamine can be released in anticipation of the effort, making the actual work feel more engaging. Great pain. This is critical because sustained motivation doesn't come from constant success or inspiration. Pain, it comes from the ability to stay connected to your goals during the slow, difficult, and uncertain phases of the process. Visualization becomes a form of mental conditioning. Just as athletes train their bodies for competition, great pain, they also train their minds for stress, fatigue, and pressure through targeted visualization. The same principle applies to anyone working toward a goal. By vividly imagining the grind, not just the glory, pain, you make your motivation more durable. This practice also reduces the emotional shock when difficulty arises. Instead of interpreting resistance as a sign to stop, the brain recalls that it has been here before, mentally at least, and that this is part of the path. The brain becomes more adaptable, more focused, and less react to discomfort. This creates a psychological environment where effort is not just tolerated, but embraced. You begin to seek challenges because you've trained yourself to derive meaning and identity from the process of trying rather than just the outcome of achieving. Great pain. That identity shift is what fuels long-term drive and resilience in any area of life, whether it's physical training, creative work, academic goals, or personal growth. Creating small wins is one of the most reliable and neuroscience-backed methods to build momentum and increase motivation over time. Dr. Andrew Huberman emphasizes that the brain does not only respond to large achievements or major breakthroughs, it is constantly tracking progress, either great pain, and even the smallest signs of movement forward can trigger powerful neurochemical responses. When we experience a sense of accomplishment However minor, the brain releases dopamine, which strengthens our desire to continue taking action. These micro rewards reinforce behavior and build confidence, great pain, which is critical for sustaining long-term effort, pain. Many people delay action because they feel overwhelmed by the size of their goals, waiting for a perfect plan or a perfect time. But this mindset keeps the brain in a passive state. In contrast, when we focus on executing small, attainable tasks consistently, we train the nervous system to associate effort with success, which builds a sense of agency and internal control, great pain. Small wins can take many forms. Waking up at the same time every morning, completing a short workout, writing a paragraph, either pain, organizing your workspace, or having one focused hour of study or work. These actions may seem trivial on their own, great pain, but their cumulative effect on motivation is profound. The brain perceives them as forward motion, and forward motion is directly tied to the release of dopamine and norepinephrine chemicals that enhance drive, focus, and the readiness to take on more complex challenges. Dr. Either great pain. Huberman explains that these act as anchors of certainty in a world full of unpredictability, either great pain. When you know you can succeed at small things, you are more willing to risk effort on larger ones. Eat pain. Each completed task becomes evidence to your brain that progress is possible. And this perception leads to behavioral momentum. Momentum is a psychological and biological state where action becomes easier because the systems that support energy, focus, and decision-making are already active. Great pain, it's much harder to initiate from a state of inertia than to maintain motion once it's begun. Great pain. That's why starting with small wins is so effective. They require minimal effort to initiate, but they light up the brain's motivational pathways, making the next action feel more natural and less forced. Over time, this builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief in your own ability to affect change and accomplish tasks. This belief is a major predictor of sustained motivation, goal achievement, great pain, and resilience in the face of setbacks. And another benefit of small wins is that they provide structure, pain. When the brain sees a path laid out with visible steps, it reduces uncertainty and lowers anxiety, great pain. The nervous system thrives when it knows what's coming next and can anticipate and prepare. Great pain, creating a series of small goals within a larger goal, provides that structure. It turns abstract ambition into tangible actions. This helps the brain stay engaged and reduces the risk of emotional fatigue or overwhelm. Either great pain. Instead of waiting for motivation to arrive, you begin to generate it through the rhythm of action and reward, which makes the process feel purposeful and manageable. Dr. Andrew Huberman explains that cold exposure and breathwork are two of the most accessible and scientifically supported tools to activate the neural circuits responsible for drive, motivation, and mental clarity. These tools work by directly influencing the autonomic nervous system and the neurochemical environment of the brain. Cold exposure, such as cold showers or immersion in cold water, stimulates the release of norepinephrine and dopamine, two key chemicals involved in alertness, focus, and sustained effort. When the body is exposed to cold, great pain, it experiences a brief but powerful stress response that activates the sympathetic nervous system. This response increases heart rate, sharpens attention, and creates a state of readiness, great pain. Regular exposure to cold helps the brain and body become more efficient at handling stress, either great pain, which translates into greater mental resilience and emotional control in daily life. In addition to the chemical benefits, cold exposure also builds psychological toughness, choosing to step into discomfort, even for a few minutes. signals to the brain that you are in control of your environment and your reactions. This act of voluntary stress strengthens circuits in the brain related to courage, self-discipline, and persistence. Over time, the brain begins to associate challenge with capability rather than fear. This is essential for building drive because it shifts the mindset from avoidance to pursuit. When you train your body to remain calm and present under cold-induced stress, you're also training your mind to stay composed and focused under pressure in other areas of life, such as work, training, or personal challenges. Breathwork functions as a complementary tool, offering both activation and regulation depending on the technique used. Fast, intense breathing methods such as Wim Hof-style breathwork or cyclic hyperventilation can elevate alertness and activate the same neurochemical systems engaged by cold exposure. Great pain. These techniques increase adrenaline, dopamine, and carbon dioxide levels in a controlled way. Great pain, which helps the body become more tolerant to stress and boosts energy and motivation. On the other hand, slow, deliberate breathing, particularly with long exhales, activates the parasympathetic nervous system and promotes calm focus. This balance between sympathetic activation and parasympathetic recovery is crucial for optimal performance and consistent motivation. Dr. Huberman often highlights how breathwork can be used in real time to shift states. For example, using physiological signs, 2 inhales followed by an extended exhale, can quickly lower anxiety and improve focus. This technique is especially useful before difficult tasks, public speaking, or moments requiring emotional control. Pain. The key to using both cold exposure and breathwork effectively lies in consistency and intentionality. They are not just tools for stress reduction or biohacking, but daily practices that shape how the brain responds to effort and adversity. When used regularly, either great pain, they recalibrate the body's baseline levels of alertness and calm, allowing for smoother transitions between rest and action. These practices also increase interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense and control internal bodily states, which strengthens the connection between mind and body. Pain. This connection is vital for recognizing when energy is low or stress is building so that corrective action can be taken early. Pain, integrating these tools into a daily or weekly routine not only enhances physiological readiness, but also deepens the sense of agency over one's motivation, drive, pain, and overall performance. Setting goals that are just beyond your comfort zone is a powerful strategy for stimulating motivation, even in increasing performance and building long-term resilience. Dr. Great Pain. Andrew Huberman explains that the human brain thrives when it is faced with challenges that are difficult but achievable. Great pain. When a goal is too easy, the brain doesn't release enough dopamine to sustain interest or effort. Great pain. When a goal is too far beyond one's current capacity, it can trigger stress responses that lead to avoidance, anxiety, and disengagement. The sweet spot for growth and motivation lies in the space where the challenge is just slightly greater than what feels comfortable or familiar. In this zone, the nervous system becomes alert, engaged, great pain, and primed to adapt. The key mechanism behind this effect is the brain's reward prediction system. When you pursue a goal that is within reach but requires stretching, pain, the brain begins to anticipate the reward and releases dopamine in proportion to the perceived effort and potential outcome. This anticipation fuels energy, increases focus, and strengthens the ability to persist. Each step taken toward that slightly uncomfortable goal reinforces the belief that progress is possible, which in turn sustains motivation. Over time, consistently operating in this zone of slight discomfort leads to neuroplastic changes in the brain that improve emotional tolerance, increase problem-solving capacity, and expand what feels possible. Dr. Huberman also emphasizes that discomfort is a signal, not a stop sign. When people experience challenges, their instinct is often to pull back, great pain. But this is the very moment where the nervous system is learning to regulate itself under stress. Pain, pushing just past the comfort zone while maintaining awareness and control, teaches the brain that discomfort does not equal danger. This reconditioning process is crucial for breaking through self-imposed limits and mental barriers, either pain. The more frequently the brain experiences success in uncomfortable situations, the more it learns to associate that discomfort with growth and capability. Another critical factor in setting stretch goals is clarity. The brain requires specificity in order to engage its attentional systems. Vague or abstract goals do not trigger the same level of neurological engagement as clearly defined and time-bound targets. When the goal is clear and the steps toward it are outlined, the brain creates a mental map that links action to outcome. Pain. This mapping activates the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for planning and decision-making, and the striatum, which is involved in habit formation and reward tracking. These areas work together to guide behavior and sustain effort. Even in the absence of immediate gratification, in addition to neurological engagement, goals outside the comfort zone also provoke emotional responses: fear, excitement, doubt, anticipation, which, when harnessed correctly, can be powerful motivators. The presence of these emotions increases the salience of the goal in the brain, meaning it becomes a higher priority, either great pain. Emotional intensity, when channeled properly, fuels commitment and deepens focus. Pain, people often discover hidden strengths when they are operating at the edge of their capabilities. And this discovery becomes a source of internal motivation that reinforces the desire to grow, achieve, and pursue even bigger goals